Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're tuning in. This is our NBA Finals preview edition of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We're finally here, gentlemen. We've had a lot of twists and turns throughout the NBA season, rigged lotteries and trades, and
It's true.
we won't rehash all that. But we're here. We've got Oklahoma City. I don't think a lot of people at maybe any point in this season would have been super surprised to hear that in May and June, Oklahoma City Thunder would be playing some meaningful basketball. But on the other side of the bracket, maybe a bit of a surprise, other than the fact that when you think about it, the Indiana Pacers are 48-16 since the beginning of January. So hottest team in basketball, playing maybe the most complete roster in basketball in the NBA Finals. I'm going to go to Ryan first. How you doing, bud? I know we got a lot to talk about here, but just kind of get the vibes in the room.
I'm good. I don't have to go into the office tomorrow, so that's nice.
Always a bonus.
It's been a busy couple weeks. We're just so it's nice to not have to do anything and taking a little trip over the weekend. So preparing for that. I need a haircut, but besides that, we're doing all right.
Bentley, how are things for you?
I'm doing well. Similar to Ryan, I'm also not working tomorrow, so that's a good thing. But Ryan and I are not working for two very different reasons, Gary. I'll let Ryan explain that at the end of the show if he so chooses to. If not, we'll talk about it offline. Yeah, I'm excited, dude. We made it. We made it all the way to the end of regular season. 82 games is a lot, and then you stack 2.5 months of playoff basketball on top of that. But we're here. We made it. We get to watch the best team in the NBA and the Oklahoma City Thunder go at it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's start with a little bit of news not related, well, I guess tangentially related to the NBA Finals. The team that the Indiana Pacers knocked out in the Eastern Conference Finals, the New York Knicks, who knocked out the Boston Celtics, who were one of the favorites to be in this position coming out of the East, got over the hump against them, but could not get over the final hump against Indiana. And Tom Thibodeau was fired not long after the final whistle of that series. I want to lay a couple of points out, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on kind of the whole thing, and then maybe some thoughts on whether you agree with maybe my thought process on kind of what happened between the Knicks and Tom Thibodeau. I had a conversation with a couple of folks, and they kept bringing up the fact that, like, Tibbs played a short rotation, and the guys looked gassed in the Eastern Conference Finals, et cetera, and, like, they were kind of insinuating that was the reason that the Knicks were firing Tom Thibodeau. And I took a moment to kind of remind them, like, this isn't a new Tom Thibodeau. This is who he was when they hired him, right? So, like, you can't blame those faults for why he was fired here. He's the most successful Knicks coach in a very, very long time. Maybe Mike D'Antoni has the next closest claim to that mantle with his little bit of a run there, but getting to an Eastern Conference Finals, having what felt like a legitimate chance to go to the NBA Finals is nothing to slouch at, especially in Madison Square Garden. Tom Thibodeau brought deep playoff runs back to New York. He did what they hired him to do, get them back relevant. They put a good roster together. But I feel like where we're at right now with this New York Knicks team is where Mark Jackson was with the Golden State Warriors. I feel like they need to, and maybe even like the Lakers were before Phil Jackson came in, and we can go back in history, and there's a number of, like, the next guy gets them over the hump, right? In multiple sports. And that's what I think right now for the Knicks. What they need is that guy who's going to come in and identify whatever it is that they need to take them over, whether it's managing personalities, which I don't think is the problem in New York, but that's what Phil did for the Lakers. Maximizing potential in terms of bringing in a new offense, which is what I think Steve Kerr did for the Warriors. I don't know what it is or who it is. I've heard some names floated around, but I just think right now I don't have the solution, but I think that's where the Knicks sit right now. So I want to kind of get your guys' thoughts on the whole scenario, but also do you think the Knicks are kind of at the same sort of precipice, or is this kind of their ceiling? I'm going to go to Bentley first on this one. Talk to me about Knicks, Tibbs, and is their future brighter, or is it going to start to dull?
Well, the minutes discussion is a real issue, right? And you can say, man, they won 60, or that, however many games they won, they were the 4 seed, 3 seed, whatever, wherever they ended up, right? First Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years. They were electric. They made a run last year. They kind of fell a little short. They went out and made a bunch of moves, brought in all these guys, revamped the roster, and now it's like we're all in on this season, and we're all watching this going, man, none of these teams in the East are going to beat Oklahoma City, right? Like, so now you have this coach who brought his team to the precipice of making the NBA Finals, and you still don't really believe that you have a chance to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder coming out of the West. You also have a coach who played his guys. There was a game in February against the Charlotte Hornets where Bridges played the first 46 and a half minutes of that game without coming out. That's the guy you traded five first round draft picks. Man, words are tough today for me. 5 first round draft picks for Mikal Bridges, and he's playing 46 and a half straight minutes to open a game against Charlotte in March. So the minutes thing is a real discussion. Pair that with him coming into the playoffs, and give Tibbs a little bit of credit, right? One of the knocks against him is that he's not imaginative. He doesn't tweak a little like things here and there. Well, he changed his starting lineup, and then he brought guys in off the bench. Unfortunately for him, he had never brought those guys off the bench before, very little, whatever. So he had no idea what to do with them. He was just like, well, here's Landry Shamet, here's DeLon Wright. Like, we'll figure it out on the fly as we go through this Eastern Conference Finals. And it obviously didn't work, So the knock against him with the minutes thing is that he God, dude, Des called me out here. Is that he doesn't play his bench enough in the regular season to be able to understand how the rotation should work, the flexibility within the lineups that he can have with these guys coming off the bench. Now, granted, DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet are probably not going to win you a playoff series, but if you don't even have a little bit of flexibility past the seventh man off your bench, like the seventh man total in your rotation, it's going to be tough to make deep runs in these playoffs. That being said, Tom Thibodeau has the same career winning percentage as Eric Spoelstra. He actually has the highest winning percentage of any coach active in the NBA right now, aside from like Denver's coach that doesn't have an NBA championship. So it goes without saying that Tom Thibodeau is an extremely talented basketball coach. He lives and breathes it. He's a basketball junkie, right? He has been his entire career, his whole life probably. What I will say in favor of Tom Thibodeau is that this roster that they have assembled is not set up to win an NBA championship. It's just not. Jalen Brunson is not Steph Curry. He is not one of the whatever pantheon level you want to put him on, ex-best players in the world, ex-best players of all time, right? Winning an NBA championship with a guard who is basically 6 foot is damn near impossible. And when you have a 7-footer who he played okay defense, talking about Cat, obviously. Yeah. He's essentially a turnstile on defense. He's not like an off-ball rim protector. He doesn't do a ton of things. His footwork gets all janky when he has to switch out onto guards. So I give Tibbs credit for getting them this far, right? They were taking down the Celtics before the Tatum injury happened. They don't have the horses to make the run that I think that they wanted to coming off of last year's player performance. So I understand why they let Tibbs go, but I think that what would have been more beneficial would have been for the organization, which is terribly run, right, to take a look inside and be like, hey, I know that we made all of these moves to bring in OG and Josh Hart, but that was previous, and we sent DiVincenzo and Julius Randle out, and we brought in Mikal Bridges. Like, we made all these moves, we got this cool roster, but it's just not that good defensively. And, we've talked a lot about their offense and how they don't run anything for Cat and it's unimaginative and all the stuff, right? But Tom got him a shitload of wins. He got him to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that was kind of the ceiling for this team. And then after 5 years of Tom being there, that's longer than a lot of coaches get in certain instances in the NBA. I say good for him, right? Go spend Jim Dolan's money, take a year off, figure out if you want to come back and coach or not. But he got them as far as that team was capable of going, I believe. And then the roster failed him, alongside him failing to develop any chemistry within his deep bench guys. So it's kind of a two-edged sword why they flamed out. So, and I understand why they fired him, but I think a more beneficial practice would have been looking as to why their roster failed them at that point.
Yeah. Good question. We're going to get to this.
Yes.
I think that sentiment is also going to be shared potentially across a little bit of our discussion. But I want to kind of piggyback a little bit on a couple of things you said. I definitely for Tibbs, right? He did great things in New York for sure. 5 seasons there, his winning percentage speaks for itself. I think the one big thing for me and why I think a change of voice in the locker room could make a difference is they built this roster specifically to combat Boston, right? And they didn't have a change up after that. And when they ran into Indiana, who wanted to run the floor and gas them out, one of the deepest rosters in basketball, they're about to play the deepest roster in basketball in the NBA Finals. They didn't have a change up. They didn't have the bench. They didn't have an audible on offense, especially. And I think that's really where they struggled. When you play a team like Indiana, you've got to be prepared to we're going to run it up and we're going to win 128 to 126 potentially on any given night. And that's not Tibbs basketball. And that's why I think, in a way, sure, they need a little bit of work on the roster. They need somebody to do more for them than just having Mitchell Robinson. Maybe they need Hartenstein back from OKC, right? They thought Cat was going to be a little better, but I think Cat got hidden quite well by Rudy Gobert out in Minnesota when they had the Twin Towers on the floor. And there was a reason Minnesota was willing to let him go for Julius Randle. But I just think that from that perspective, the inability or even maybe unwillingness to change things up that we know is pretty well known with Tibbs throughout his history in Chicago and Minnesota, and now again in New York, maybe a new voice changes things for them. Maybe there's better effort on the defensive end, because I'll say this, I don't know that Julius Randle is that much of an upgrade defensively from Karl Anthony Towns. And this was a good defensive team in 2024, right? This was a good defensive team last year. I just don't know what went wrong defensively, other than the fact that they built this roster with one intention, to go after Boston, to beat them 128 to 126 on a given night when you can get them if they're not going to shoot well. So that's my only real point with, I just think maybe a new voice would help in New York. Ryan, over to you. I know you've been waiting patiently.
I'm very patient. It's okay. I think my whole thought process on this is that we have got to a point where the Knicks team is constructed in a way that does not fit the way Tibbs likes to coach. So there's an argument that I think makes sense if you're the GM making this argument. It's we want someone who accents the strengths of this lineup with the way they like to coach, right? Versus, I think Tibbs, as a defensive-minded coach, probably doesn't love this team and then the way they play consistently, right? I think they were one of the worst defenses of the competitors all year. And that's a personnel thing, not necessarily a Tibbs thing. I think we've seen Tibbs have a lot of great defenses, throughout time, scheme-wise, but you need the players to do it. And I think if I'm the GM, I'm saying, hey, you can't train bad defenders to be great defenders. You can maybe get them to be average, but I would argue we barely got them to there, potentially not even there. And we're trying to find somebody who can utilize the strengths of this team a little more effectively, with more of an offensive focused, thought process from the coach. I that is what I think happened. Like, that makes sense to me. A lot of the other stuff, I think, is just all talk. Like, oh, everybody was tired. They didn't look tired. Josh Hart was flying all over the place. I mean, he always is, but like, he doesn't look tired, right? Like, these guys don't look tired to me. I don't think it was overplaying anybody. I think it was more of a scheme fit, where it was like, Tibbs is a great coach, but maybe we've traded him out of the team basically at this point, right? And I think that makes sense to hopefully go in a direction where you can find a guy who fits that a little better. I would like to see somebody who's a little more creative offensively. I think that was actually their biggest issue was, I talked about it before, Jalen Brunson not moving the ball well. And I think you can scheme that a little better for him, because I think partly that's how he plays, and partly that's how the team was, designed to play under Coach Tibbs. So I would like to see a more free-flowing offense. I think Brunson could thrive a little more than he already is in those situations. And I think guys, like Cat would benefit from that. Just some creativity, some free flow, and I'd like to see something like that. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm sad to see it. I've always liked Tibbs as a coach. I think he's been good for a long time, even all the way back to when he was a Rockets assistant way back in the day. I thought he was a great assistant coach, focusing on the defense, and that's kind of been his calling card. So I think he's going to find a place, if he wants to, that hopefully is a little better constructed for him. Maybe a Jimmy Butler-esque team, maybe not Jimmy Butler himself, but a team like that where he has a guy like that, I think is really where he shines in his defensive scheming. So that's really all I think. I think a lot of the rest is kind of whatever. I do agree there's some like in-game adjustment issues, but I think it's really just a scheme issue. It's a guy who he runs a 4-3 and you have a 3-4 personnel. Like, you just can't. It's not that easy to just throw those guys into different spots all the time.
Yeah. That's a good comparison. I like that. The defensive scheme in the NFL, you build your front seven is very different in a 4-3 than it is in a 3-4 for sure. So I have a final question for you guys on the defensive side of the ball, because I think we're all in agreement that this team underperformed defensively for having probably one of the brighter defensive minds we've seen in our lifetime in basketball as their head coach. They were a top 10 defensive efficiency team the last 2 seasons. Where did it go wrong in the playoffs? In this series against Indiana, especially, where did it go wrong? I'll go to you first, Ryan. What do you see as the biggest thing that went wrong against Indiana defensively?
Defensively, I mean, Indiana shot the ball, extremely well. I think Jalen Brunson, to some extent, is just a limit defensively, and you can put him or Cat in almost every action, and it becomes very difficult to guard, right? You can do it on the perimeter, you can do it in the high post, you can even run stuff in the post where Cat has to get involved. Like, because they have 2 pretty significant defensive limitations at the generally where you would have the point of attack, but they can't do that, right? So they have to switch guys around. Now you have size mismatches, and then Cat gets put into every 2-man action that you can think of, right? Every single one. And he has limitations defensively. I don't think he's a bad defender, but he has limitations. And when the playoffs become, how do we make that as annoying as possible? Which Indiana had the personnel to make that very difficult on them. I think Indiana's a great offense, one of the best offenses in the league. They're going to exploit that over and over again. I mean, they hunted for Brunson and Cat, basically. If you watch the games, you see it happens a ton, right? And even then, if you can avoid that, Bridges hasn't looked as good defensively as I think people expected when they traded for him. So they have some limitations. it's my whole point of like, I don't think a scheme necessarily solves any of that. You can hide it, but you can't solve it. And in the playoffs, it's even more difficult to hide it because they're not worried about like, we got to do this for 82 games. It's like we can spam some, different actions to annoy you, and then you can't adjust because there's not enough time to adjust.
And you're facing the same personnel 7 straight times, right?
Yeah.
7 straight
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Whereas you could hide it in a 1-game series because you can't adjust in game as easily as you could in a 7-game, right? So it really just feels like a personnel issue more than anything, where, they're probably fine in the regular season. Like, they're not terrible defensively, but when you have to play a top, 5 offense and you have to deal with those mismatches, 60 possessions, it's it's difficult. And again, even if you avoid that, right? Even if Jalen Brunson is not at the point of attack, well, he becomes the second side defender, which is just as terrible because Indiana's got tons of second side attack guys. It's like they swing the ball, and now Brunson's one-on-one against a 6'6" guy or a 6'7" guy, and it's like, well, he just shoots over him, right? Like it just, even if you hide him, there's still problems.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece, and I'm not going to spoil too much in terms of the discussion for the finals, but I think Indiana poses a lot of problems for a lot of defenses, not just the Knicks, because they have such a varied style. They're deep, and they've got a lot of guys they can throw at you that do a lot of different things, offensively, but also they challenge you with their pressure. They want to run the floor, and Halliburton is so efficient with the ball. He doesn't turn it over, right? You just don't get a lot of opportunities to create what you would call defensive wins against a team like Indiana. Bentley, what are your thoughts? You generally agree with Ryan, or any additional thoughts?
No, I mostly just want to echo what Ryan Ed you said. Your point of you're playing the same guys every other night, 6-7 times in a row. You're going to learn the tendencies. They're going to learn the tendencies, right? And then having Brunson and Cat on the court as much as you do, that are just two gaping defensive holes, and putting them in every single action. We say it all the time. NBA playoffs are about matchups, right? Like who matches up with who. And when you have to play those guys as many minutes as you do, especially in crunch time, it's just not going to go well for your team, right? Bridges was a guy that came into the league. Same with OG, came into the league and hung their hat on defense for their first 5-6 years, whatever it was. And then they come here and it's like, when you got these guys playing alongside you, your individual defense is not going to be elevated, right? And you have to play so much better guarding the ball handler, the point of attack, and then also off the ball when your poor defenders get switched on, right? It just the very good defenders that they have to play at such a high level to make up for the holes that Cat and Brunson leave on the court, and it's tough to win that way. Kudos to them for making this far, but like the entire time watching them, it kind of felt like fool's gold, if I'm being totally honest. I was not a huge fan of this team, but and to Ryan's point earlier, when he kind of retorted my comment about playing the minutes too much, I didn't mean it in the sense that they were worn down at this point in the season. I meant it as in, like you said, Gary, you have to have a plan B. You get to this point in the season and plan A is not working. If you don't have the ability to shift into something else, we saw it in game, was it 5? When Brunson got in foul trouble, and then Cat also got in foul trouble. He was forced to play DeLauray and Shamet both in the first half. And what do you do at that point? Because we've never seen this lineup before on the court. We don't, they may have played 15 minutes all season together, the guys that he had out there going. It's like, you have to, one, for the sake of not wearing your guys down, yes, that does certainly play a role, but like, you have to know what you have in your guys and how they all coalesce and play together, because these guys don't practice during the season, right? They have walkthroughs in hotel conference rooms. Like that's a practice when you're on the road. So, they get training camp, but how much did Tyler Kolek play in training camp? How much did Pacom Dadie play in training camp? Those are guys that are going to be going into their second year next year, and we have no idea if they're NBA players or not.
Yeah, for sure. Ryan, did you have something else?
I'm just upset he didn't mention my guy Ariel Hook-Porty.
My apologies. I forgot about Hook-Porty.
Yeah.
It's because I never saw him on the fucking court.
I think both Dadier and Hook-Porty did play like not in the playoffs, but like into the season like a little bit. And I was like, oh, are they in the rotation? And then it was like playoffs and lock them out. Which, to be fair, they're not ready to play in the playoffs, but it was just funny to.
But it's the job of the head coach to get those guys ready to play in the playoff. They don't have to be contributors in the playoff, but they have to be ready to play in the playoff. You know what I mean? If called upon.
Yeah. All right. Well, to close the door on the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe the only misstep that Tyrese Halliburton made during the entire Eastern Conference Finals came after the Eastern Conference Finals, when they were announcing the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, and there's video evidence that he was starting to walk toward the podium, the pseudo podium, and they announced that Pascal Siakam won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Real quick, I want to go. We'll go Ryan first. Do you agree with Siakam as MVP, or should it have been Halliburton?
I think I had Siakam. If I remember when I first looked at it, I had Siakam as MVP. But I thought it was pretty close. Yeah. I thought Siakam was the most consistent performer every night, and also the better defensive player. I also thought he unlocked a lot of what Indiana tries to do in kind of the in-between side of the court that Halliburton does not typically score from, or other guys don't typically score from. So yeah, I'm fine with it, but I would have also been fine with Halliburton. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but like Pascal was like 5% better, but like they're so close to each other. It was a great series from both of them, honestly.
Yeah. Bentley, your thoughts?
I agree. Tyrese obviously played great, and I'm just blanking on names. Pascal, we just talking about him. I forgot his name. He went 30 plus 3 times. I'm cool with that. You score 30 more than I guess twice at this point. You score 3 times in a series. I'm cool with you getting MVP. That's fine. But we all understand that Halliburton is the stall that stirs the drink for that team. Right. We all understand that. Right,
for sure. I thought that there was a potential that he would have won it because of the moments. He had a couple of moments in the series. He also played very well, as Ryan said. Like 5% might be the difference between the product on the floor. Defensively, you should certainly give the tip of the cap to Pascal. Halliburton is, as you put it, Bentley, the straw that stirs the drink for them. But yeah, I thought potentially he would get it for the moments, especially in that setting, not just the Eastern Conference Finals, but also the fact that in the Garden. But yeah, I think in the end, they probably got it right based on the actual product on the floor. But I wouldn't have been at all upset if they'd have gone the other way, for sure. All right, well, let's get to it. We have, as we've already alluded to, we have probably, if not undebatably, the best roster in basketball in the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have run roughshod through the Western Conference with one exception. Denver pushed them to a Game 7. Other than that, they have decimated Western Conference competition, NBA competition. They are fourth or tied for third all-time in wins total throughout a season, going into the NBA Finals here. And they will be facing the hottest team in basketball over the last few months. Indiana, we mentioned, they're 48-16 down the stretch here, coming in with a lot of momentum, a lot of emotion. But I think, honestly, that emotion might get tapered off a bit because of the time between the end of the Eastern Conference Finals and the start of the NBA Finals. I know we talked about this a little bit. I know it's schedule of arenas and schedule of TV time and those sorts of things, but man, it's a long time between the end of the conference finals and the start of the finals. But I digress. Let's talk about the actual matchup here. I want to go your way first, Ryan. Talk to me about Oklahoma City and the way Indiana matches up against them, and then give me your pick. Who's going to win the finals and in how many games?
Well, it's a terrible matchup for Indiana. Um, I think the thing that we saw is, a big that can give the team some trouble sometimes is really the best strategy, I think, for teams. Unfortunately, there's only like 3 of those guys in the entire league. And Indiana does not have one. So yeah, terrible matchup, great perimeter defenders. We talked about it last week. I mean, it's just defenders across the board. It's a great kind of offense versus defensive matchup, which I think is cool. We're going to kind of see, how that plays out. I think historically we would say that the defense wins a lot of these matchups, but I would say this defense is even better than the traditional defense offense matchups. So I think it has even more of a extra benefit for them because they're even better than most defenses typically are. I said last week, I said OKC would win in 6. I think Indiana definitely catches fire one night and shoots like 45% as a team from 3 and beats them. Right? OKC is still very young. I mean, so is Indiana. To be fair, Indiana's like 3-year average age older. Like they're pretty like close. They're both in their like mid 20s, average age wise. But I think OKC falls asleep sometimes. Like they just like one night will just not show up. Right? And I think that's maybe an age thing. And then I think we'll get like a Halliburton or a Siakam game that just pulls them another win. But I just don't see them. Like I don't see a pathway to 4 games unless somehow the X factor that I thought about that like would have to play out of their mind would be like Aaron Nesmith. And I say that on both sides of the floor because he'll be guarding SGA a lot. And he's going to need to give like 15 to 18 points per game on the other end, mostly shooting 3. I don't think that's going to happen over an entire series, but that's like, I think they need stuff like that to like have a chance, right? And it's like, okay, stop the MVP from doing MVP stuff, and
also have a microwave game on the other end.
Yeah, also be the 3rd or 4th leading scorer on the team, right? Like that's throughout a whole series. He is capable. Maybe it's a 1 in 50 chance that happens. I'm not saying it's 1 in 50 for the series, but that specific event where he becomes like, this incredible 2-way guy in the series, like that is possible. Yeah, I give Indiana like a 15% chance to win the series, something like that, which, hey, that's not so bad.
Yeah, you're just about right in line with Vegas. The line is pretty heavy.
I think they had it at like 10, right? Roughly 10%.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like 12% chance or something like that based on the line. It's 650 is pretty heavy.
Yeah,
that's a pretty hefty line to lay for the series. Opening game is 10 points tonight. Opening game is 10 points. I honestly, if you want to make a little money, I would take the 10 points tonight because of the long layoff between games. I think this game could be tight, and then if you're on the OKC side, you might see them settle in and take control of the series as they shake off maybe some of the layover. A young team especially can have what we call quote unquote rust factor, right? Older teams, more savvy teams are able to kind of manage that. I think historically we've seen. I like the point you made though, Ryan, that it's the clash of styles. I think it's going to be fun watching how. I think the one big thing I'm going to be watching is how the defensive style of OKC is both managed in terms of officiating. We've talked about that throughout the course of the playoffs, that they play the Legion of Boom style where they're like, they just can't call everything. And how much is that going to disrupt what Indiana wants to do? They want to get out. They want to run. They don't want to be held up. They don't, the physicality of OKC, is that going to disrupt their ability to run? Or is OKC not going to be able to settle in defensively and be able to disrupt them like that? I don't question whether OKC has the athleticism to keep up with them. It's just a matter of whether or not Indiana can get to them before they get set defensively. And is that the way that they score points? Bentley, over to you. What are your thoughts on this series? And give me your pick and in how many games?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and pick the Oklahoma City Thunder to win. But I know,
Thin
really
limb.
being bold here. Gary, to your point, 14% chance, not being that bad of a chance as a Wizard fan. That really that one stings a little bit.
Yeah,
14% chance, very easy to swing and miss on that.
yes.
The series. All right. I think that Ryan mentioned X Factor. I don't know that Oklahoma City needs a quote unquote X Factor to win. But if you're looking for somebody not named SGA to kind of be a swing factor in this series, I think it's Chet Holmgren. So I was having this conversation with someone today, and I was telling them that for most of the season and a lot of the playoffs, especially in the Denver series, we saw Oklahoma City run what has recently become called a too big offense. We used to just call it a center power forward. Like a too big line. I was like, oh, there's two tall people. That's like a 4 and a 5.
That's
Whatever.
such a strange concept in 2025.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I get it. I understand why people call it that, but like it used to just be called a basketball team. But so here's why I say that Chet could be like a swing factor, right? Can Chet provide enough defensive rim protection without Hartenstein on the court to deter when Halliburton gets in the paint and when Siakam gets in the paint? I think what we're going to see is a lot of Chet Holmgren guarding Siakam, and they're going to have Jalen Williams, J-Dub probably on Miles Turner. They're not going to put their center on Miles Turner for the simple fact that Miles Turner doesn't play a post style offense, right? He lurks 10 to 20 feet from the rim. That's kind of where he exists. Takes a lot of jumpers, makes a lot of jumpers, phenomenal offensive player, but he's not a guy that's going to bang bodies. He's not going to back you down. That's not who he is, and that's not what he does, which is perfect for Chet Holmgren to be able to kind of guard the backside, if you will. So I think if they are able to thrive in their offensive and defensive sets with Chet being the only big man, and obviously they have the flexibility to bring Hartenstein back in, and they can take Chet out and just run Hartenstein if they need a bigger body. Like, that's fine too. But I think this is a one big man series for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then they have that rotating cast of defensive dogs out there. You know, Caruso, Dort, Casey Wallace, Isaiah Joe, like all these guys that can guard the perimeter players. SGA, obviously, they rotate in these defensive cast of characters to create a ton of ball pressure on the guards from Indiana. And if they're able to thrive doing that, I think they win the series in 4, truthfully. I respect what Ryan said. And last week I said 6, right? I said Indiana would lose in 6. You know, Oklahoma City wins in 6. I have changed course. I think it will be 5, but the opportunity there is for it to be 4 if they can run the one big lineup in Oklahoma City, because they're going to create so much ball pressure. And Chet is so good at playing center field that if he's not tied up in a 1v1 matchup with Siakam, he's just going to kind of erase the paint for Indiana. That's how I view it happening. If Aaron Nesmith had not turned his ankle and been bad like the last 2.5 games or whatever of the previous series, I may feel differently about it. But I don't know. Like, I respect what Rick Carlisle can do. Obviously, I respect the chaos that Indiana plays with on offense. They run on everything. I mean, made baskets, missed baskets, live ball turnovers, you know, everything. They're getting downhill. They're at the paint. They're shooting threes. Phenomenal on offense, right? But they have not played a team that applies as much ball pressure yet in the playoffs as we're about to see going into this series. So I'm going to say Oklahoma City in 5. I think if Indiana wants to have a chance of not going home down 0-2, they have to win tonight. For what you said, Gary, the rust factor, right? I believe that Caruso was the only one on Oklahoma City's roster who has even played in an NBA Finals, let alone won an NBA Finals. I didn't double check that, but just off the top of my head, I think that's true. And so I'm sure that he's been in the guys' ears all week, like, hey, stay up, stay ready, you know, lock in. But it is, like you said, Gary, like the younger teams They have a young head coach who's never been here before. It is a whole new world to navigate playing in the NBA Finals. And elite athletes, professional athletes have a great way of compartmentalizing things and kind of moving on to the next moment or whatnot. And obviously the Oklahoma City Thunder are a phenomenal team, and I'm sure that they can do that. But like I said, if Indiana wants to have any chance of going home not down 0-2, I think that they need to capitalize and win tonight because they have continuity, because they've played long series back-to-back already, and they just don't really have any let up in their game. And we've seen it over and over again, right? If they're down 7 with a minute and a half to go, they're still in the game. So if they and we've seen Oklahoma City lose game once at home already. They lost it to Denver. Unfortunately for them, if they win tonight, they probably lose the next 4. But it happens, So I will be rooting for Indiana because I think it'd be awesome to see this kind of upset. Not that I have anything against Oklahoma City. I've said my piece on here about SGA and the way that he plays. Immense respect for how talented and gifted he is, but it's not my favorite style of basketball, and that's fine. A lot of people love him. I get it. I much prefer the way that Indiana played basketball, and Tyrese Halliburton specifically, which leads me to a question, actually. After we close this segment, I have a question. I've already asked Ryan. I'll ask you, Gary.
Excellent.
But I'm going to OKC in 5.
But you see a realistic scenario where they win in 4.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Well, I'm going to be super contrarian here. I kind of spoiled it in our group chat that I was, and I will be transparent that part of my reasoning for finding ways to convince myself to pick the Indiana Pacers in 6 is because the NBA has kind of made a hater out of me with OKC. I don't enjoy watching a game where a team that's already really good defensively is bear hugging folks, and they play. I didn't like it with the Legion of Boom either. I want to watch a good defense. I don't want to watch you tackling folks when they're in the middle of a play just because they can't call everything, right? And we talked about Game 7 with Caruso guarding Jokic in the way he was, holding both of his arms down, on entry passes and those sorts of things. So transparently, I'm aware. I am on a little bit of a hate train right now with OKC, just because stylistically and the way that SGA style of play too, it's annoying. But I'm not going to go too deeply into that. We've already talked a lot about that. On the other side, I'm going to justify my pick of Indiana, and I think Bentley, you mentioned Chet Holmgren being an X factor. I'm going to go the other side with Miles Turner being an X factor because I do agree with you that I think. I agree with both of you that I think that Chet Holmgren is going to cover Siakam more often, and Jalen Williams is probably going to cover Miles Turner more often, at least early in the series. I expect Rick Carlisle to put Miles Turner in a lot of pick and roll or screen and pops with Tyrese Halliburton handling the ball. And that matchup is a nightmare for OKC because you either get Miles Turner matched up against a much, much smaller guard in a situation where he can take advantage. And he is a good shooter for a big man. You mentioned his ability to hit threes. He can shoot the mid-range game pretty well as well. Or you're going to have to get Chet Holmgren coming off of Siakam to help, and Siakam can murder you in the mid-range as well. So I think that matchup is tough for OKC, and I think they're going to have to audible pretty early on, get Hartenstein and Holmgren on the floor more, or go no bigs and just play all of their swing defensive players, Dort and Joe and Caruso and J-Dub and all of them on the floor at the same time to combat some of what I think Rick Carlisle is going to do to put pressure on the OKC defense. The other thing, the biggest thing, the number one thing is when you look back at the Denver series, the games that Denver won, they didn't turn the ball over. And what does Indiana not do? Turn the ball over. And we have heard nothing but how historically great Tyrese Halliburton has been at producing offense, orchestrating an offense, and not turning the ball over. And that goes all the way back to his time in high school at Iowa State and now in the NBA. It's his calling card is efficient on offense, don't turn the ball over, value the rock. And if you can value the rock against this Oklahoma City team, I think we've seen the blueprint with Denver. That's how you beat this team. You You obviously can't put them on the charity stripe a lot on defense, and Indiana didn't do that a lot against New York, with the exception of a game or two where I think whistles might have gotten a little out of control. But I think offensively, the efficiency with which they play, don't turn the ball over, and the fact that I think Miles Turner creates a little more issues for them than maybe they even want to admit, in terms of where Rick Carlisle. I trust Rick Carlisle. I trust him to come up with the right game plan to put Indiana's offense in a situation to succeed against OKC. Do they have the horses to do it? I agree with you guys. This roster is phenomenal. I'm probably going to be wrong, but I've been transparent about why I'm doing it, and now I'm working hard to justify my pick of Indiana in 6. All right, Bentley, your way for your question.
I hope you're right, by the way. OKC
That's why I
6.
said up here, I said I think we're going to have some of this sentiment here. I think there's going to be some.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for Indiana, but I think OKC is going to win.
Yeah. I would love to see Indiana win. I think it'd be exciting. Question. I've asked Ryan. He can give his answer again after you, Gary. All right. Going into next season, brand new franchise. You have to pick one of these two players to start your franchise with. All things equal, money aside. You can either have SGA or you can have Tyrese Halliburton. What is your pick and why? I said that I would pick Halliburton. Actually, Ryan, you answer it first. We'll let Gary think. I don't want to put him on the spot like that. Ryan, your pick as to who you would select and why.
I said I would take SGA, but I could see the argument for Halliburton because of the ease of building a team around Halliburton. I think SGA requires a little more building around in a more unique way, with very specific types of players. Not as specific as like Giannis, but somewhere in the middle. Whereas Halliburton, I think, has a lot more flexibility on who you have to play him with. Outside of you need some defensive players. That's probably the one caveat with Halliburton. But yeah, I said SGA.
Yeah, I said Halliburton because so we used the floor and ceiling method, right? I think that the floor of the team with SGA is higher. Obviously, very high ceiling as well. A team with SGA has a high floor and a high ceiling. I think a team with Halliburton has a lower floor, but a higher ceiling than does a team specifically built around these two players, right?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you both. And I was going to say, knee-jerk reaction. I'm very much in favor of a traditional point guard that can score versus a scoring player who plays point guard. And I know the SGA doesn't exclusively play point guard in that offense. They and as Ryan put it, right, you kind of have to build a roster knowing that you've got a bit of a combo guard who is probably listed as your point guard, but doesn't necessarily play specifically point guard. I think it's easier for me to take a guy like Halliburton who plays a much more traditional style of point guard and can score, especially if in waves, like he can get hot at times and score a lot in a very short amount of time. I can build a roster around that probably easier than I can build a roster around SGA. If you told me I had as many draft picks as Sam Presti did, maybe I can build a better roster around SGA. But if you told me that I was starting a roster fresh with, whatever fantasy draft style we're going to do out of the NBA player pool right now, I think I would go Halliburton too. And for anybody out there who thinks that's a slight against SGA because we all picked Halliburton, it's not. They're both great players. I always have to caveat that because every time you have a conversation like this, it turns into, oh, you hate this guy. I don't. He's a good player.
Sure.
But I agree.
I do hate SGA because he went to Kentucky, but that's a totally different story.
Totally different reasons.
Yeah.
Totally different reasons.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, I think go ahead.
Did you guys see the Orlando Magic are bringing back the pinstripes full time?
Yeah, I love it. Love it. They changed up their logo a little bit too. I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's a neat change. For sure. All right, I think that brings us to again. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
I think that brings us to the conclusion. We covered the finals. We covered a couple of topics. I wanted to go around the room. Any closing thoughts? We'll go to Ryan first.
Okay, I have y'all want to do some finals trivia real fast?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. All right. These are
From the
easy questions.
1948 NBA Finals.
These are layups. Okay, I'm gonna give you all layups. Okay, it's just like 3 or 4 quick questions. Okay. All right. Who's the only guy to win the Finals MVP while losing the finals? It's only happened once in NBA history. It happens in the NFL quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, it's happened like a handful of times.
It's a long time ago. I'm gonna know it as soon as you say it, and it's gonna bother me because this is an answer that I should know.
Well, I'll give you.
I do know who it is. I do know who it is.
Mm.
It's a person who played in a lot of finals and did not win a lot of them.
He did play. He played in a lot. It's not Wilt.
No, it's not Will.
Though similar sounding last name to that first name. It was 1969 was the year. And it was, you want the answer, Gary? You want to give a guess? Jerry West.
Yep.
Losing to Boston in 1969. He averaged like 38 and 5 in a losing effort.
As soon as you said that, I knew it because Dan Patrick talks about that a lot. He's a big Jerry West guy.
Yeah,
he
a
was
lot
like
of people
1 in 5 in the finals or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, worse than that. He was, I think, 1 in 10.
Sure.
I think he never beat the Celtics.
Yeah.
And he played the Celtics every single time, but twice in the finals. He played the Knicks once or twice, I forget. But he won in 72 as his only championship after starting in 1960. So it took him a while. Okay. Easy question here. Another layup. Most points in a finals game. You know who has that?
I have a guess. I'm not confident.
Okay.
Do you have a guess, Gary? My guess is Michael.
That's my guess, too.
Second all time. He is second all time. I think he had like a 55-point game. This guy had more than 55.
Giannis had a 50.
Yeah, that's up there.
Him.
That's probably top 5 or 6 for sure.
Is it Tatum?
Nope.
No.
I know he had one big one last year. But...
Not Tatum.
Can I get a decade?
Yeah, the 60s.
Wilt Chamberlain.
It was not Wilt Chamberlain.
Jerry West.
Nope.
All right.
It's not Bill Russell. He never scored a ton.
It's not Bill Russell. It is Elgin Baylor, who scored 61, I believe, in the 62 finals in a losing effort to Boston. I think they won that game that he scored the 61, but they went to Game 7 and lost. Okay, I'll ask my last two simple one. Most rebounds in a finals game. Tell me what you think the number is. Let's just do that.
23.
Nope, higher.
31.
Nope, higher.
36.
Nope, higher.
Fuck. 40.
40 exactly. Yep.
Oh, it's got to be back in like the 60s.
It is. Yep.
Okay. Is this Bill Russell?
It is Bill Russell.
Okay.
Bill Russell had 40. He did it twice.
Which YMCA was he playing?
I believe he was playing the Lakers in one. And
Los Angeles School for the Deaf and Blind.
It might have been the Hawks on the other one. I forget. But
40 rebounds. That is. I know the numbers were insane back then because shooting was just a fucking disaster. But 40 is a lot of fucking rebounds.
Yeah, when you average, like the biggest guys average like 20 something, right? So it's almost double with the typical, like a high averages. All right, last question. This is not an old question, okay? This is a relatively modern question.
I was alive for this.
70s.
We all were alive for this one. That's the clue. What team has scored the least amount of points in a finals game?
The Lakers.
Nope.
Jazz.
It is the Jazz. Yep.
Oh, nice.
I remember
They-
it was like 63.
I believe they scored 54 in 1998
Oh.
against the Bulls.
Yeah, it was tragic. I remember
Absolutely got
during the
locked
Last
down.
Dance, I think it was the last time I saw that pop up.
The Lakers scored 68 points on June 10th against the Pistons. I'm not saying you're wrong. That's where my mind went because I remember that series was terrible.
Yeah. Against the Ben Wallace Pistons.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that Jazz. They shot. Didn't they shoot under 20% in that game too?
I mean, the 90s, they scored in the 90s typically, so you'd have it's like 40 points below. It would have had to have been like 30s or 20s, yeah.
June 7th, 1998, Utah Jazz scored 54 points.
Yep. Karl Malone had half of them probably.
Lost by 42.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was close.
Yeah, they almost got there.
Couple bounces here or there, they would have had it.
A lucky bounce, an extra rebound.
That is getting dominated.
Stockton hits a mid-range.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. Pocket pass.
Sorry, I think those are interesting facts.
Yeah.
Those are. That's all of them?
I mean, I have more, but we're good for now. I don't want to run the show too late.
I love trivia, even though Ryan always goes way outside my wheelhouse.
You got that one?
I did
get
that.
Good. Yeah.
I did get that one.
I actually didn't know that one. I knew the other ones. I did not know that one. I actually looked that one up.
Yeah, I remember it from The Last Dance. That's why. If I hadn't watched Last Dance, I'd have been in trouble.
Yeah, we were all pretty young for that one, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just mad that I guess probably the second lowest scoring game. And it wasn't even close.
Right?
Yeah. And that was a relatively normal game back then.
Double digits.
Yeah.
That was just a regular game back then. 61 is like that. Pretty good scoring game in 2004.
68. They had 68.
Oh, 68. Okay. Yeah.
Wait,
yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of like 70-point games in that time period. I remember them. Spurs had a lot of those.
Kobe had 11 points. Shaq had 14 points, and nobody else was in double digits.
Good game for all of them.
Rip had 31 though.
Rip.
31 of the 88 points for Detroit.
He's a guy who gets unfairly forgotten.
Great player, yeah.
Goddamn good.
Darvin Ham was on that team.
He was, yep. Yeah.
They also have Ben Wallace's name in this box score as Cameron Wallace. I guess if you don't get drafted, you don't get your given name in the box score.
Rashid and Cameron Wallace. Is that his middle name or something?
His
middle
name is Kamey.
Let's see.
Yeah, Kamey. Ben Kamey. Yeah.
I mean, this is just the Google AI.
It's funny though.
Yeah, it's Ben Kamey Wallace.
Yeah,
but the Google AI has it as Cameron Wallace.
Listen,
sure.
AI is not taking over the fucking world anytime soon.
At least not the Google one.
Go tell them I said that.
OpenAI may have a better chance.
Well, I got to make a phone call, guys.
Yeah. Oh shit! All right, Bentley, you got any closing thoughts for us on our way out?
No, we're entering the final stretch here. But Gary, this is exciting news for you and I because it means that college football is almost back.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, we are closing. We're under what? We're 78 days, I think it is.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, buddy. All right, well, for Bentley and Ryan and everybody else here at Backyard Sports, this has been Backyard Buckets NBA Finals preview. We'll be back next week to talk what action has been completed. And if Bentley is right, we might be talking about a potential sweep with the way that OKC matches up. But we'll see y'all. Same bat time, same bat channel, talking NBA Finals action next Thursday. We are out.